to order. So roll call. Commissioner Mecca.
Here.
Commissioner Fickel.
Here.
Trustee Renner.
Here.
Minor-Sensky.
Here.
President Lysak. Clerk Kellner.
Here.
Commissioner Bennett.
Here.
Trustee Hoddishell.
Here.
And Commissioner Zabriskie.
Here.
Also have Fire Marshal Bronca and Engineer Al. Move on to item 2, consideration and approval of minutes from the January 28th, 2021 regular meeting of the Planning Commission.
Make motion to dispense with the reading.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Page 4, after Trustee Hoddishell asked aye, that should be it. Page 5 in the middle paragraph, is misspelled twice, B-E-R-M instead of B-U.
Anybody else have any changes?
Yeah, actually, in the engineer's report number 7, some of the stuff there for Naomi is really kind of, the administrative assistant spoke to what was the boss was advised to let Naomi, that administrative assistant spoke to the boss, or that she was needed to speak with Mr. Khan.
Oh, yeah.
I think it seems
Okay.
a little bit,
Let Naomi know.
yeah. There's a couple different things in there, but this one was most glaring.
Does I make a motion to approve as amended?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. Move on to item 3, old business, A, village staff/officials review, discussion, and status update to the planning commission regarding the Cajun Phase 2 fill project. The property is located at approximately and surrounding South 72 West 23085 National Avenue, and it is Zone B3 General Business District.
I'll do the update. I didn't visit the site, but Will Hine and Eric Pedersen from the Public Works were out there this past week. And snow covered, site is compliant, didn't see much with rilling or anything, even though we had a little bit of melt, couldn't see anything, didn't see any discharge. So they're gonna continue to check in now that we're having some snow melt and make sure we stay compliant.
Very good. Thank you. Item 3B, Review, discussion, and possible approval of site plan / plan of operations request of applicant Jamin Peterson doing business as Lake Park Storage Condos LLC to develop a 42-unit self-storage / small business condominium project on 4.11 acres of land located north and east of State Highway 164, Big Bend Drive at Edgewood Avenue, excluding direct frontage on either. The property owners are Howard Gleason and Maureen Gleason, Extreme Exteriors Incorporated, South 8654 Big Bend Road LLC, and EEI Construction LLC. The property is zoned B3 General Business District.
Right, so this item was taken up for discussion at last month's meeting. It was eventually tabled by the planning commission with a need for follow-up kind of on two fronts. One is environmental concerns with respect to the property to the east were raised and discussed at length. And this particular project has a need to develop a driveway access or a private street access point that cuts through that property where it's understood to be contaminated. The other thing that caused the commission to table it was, in addition to that, concerns expressed in the staff reports by the planner and by the village's engineer with respect to the project for follow-up by the applicant. Generally speaking, the project was on good feet. A lot of little details to attend to with respect to lighting, amendments to the certified survey map, additional information to be revealed on the plans with respect to the surveying data and so forth. Right out the gate following that meeting, within a couple of weeks, I did get some follow-up from the applicant in the form of the condominium declaration document, but we don't yet have a condominium plat to go with that. So I know that the village's attorney has reviewed that condominium declaration, but again, it reaches conclusions based on this plan that hasn't got final approval and conclusions based on the lack of a condominium plat. So the conclusions and the advice go so far, but they can't come to final conclusion until we get the rest of the plan cast into stone with an approval from the planning commission. After that, beginning early last week, I got a contact from the applicants beginning to follow through on the various requirements that were set forth in the staff report. And that began on Monday, and then it really came in hot late last week, understanding that my staff reports go to the village clerk on Friday. So I make every effort to process as much information as is given to me. One of the conditions in my staff report, for instance, was that future amendments to plans be reflected in red line or ballooned or somehow otherwise indicated, so that when I go back and I look at these revised plans, I'm not having to search to see what's been changed. I'm not having to do a scavenger hunt there. And that wasn't the case in the updated plans that I received. So that sets you back in terms of your ability to review. The certified survey map update that I received wasn't adequate. I didn't look at what you sent on Monday now, Jamin, just a couple of days ago. But the CSM you sent late last week still didn't properly inform what the purpose of the 30-foot easement is out of 164. It also showed the easement it showed the old easement or the existing easement and your proposed road location being two separate things on the parcel to the east. So that CSM is not in order, consistent with the plans that are being proposed by you. I did get a lighting plan from you. Didn't review it, came in on Monday. It's very difficult for me to accept multiple emails flying in over the course of a couple days, late in the process, and have to try and sort them all out. What needs to happen is you need to finalize all of the updates required by the staff conditions into one revised full packet
Okay,
and resubmit that as a hard copy resubmittal for us to review. Because ultimately, all of this is going to have to be put into a paper form for file. And to review it as scattered documents in attachments that don't even have the right subject line in the emails, there's no way for me to keep track of all that when there's this many moving parts on a project. So, to summarize, I guess, where I feel I stand on this is that they have made some progress. It was a little rushed and it started a little late in the process to be able to give you anything worth opening up discussion on at tonight's meeting. I would suggest that it remain on the table until next month. By then, I would hope that you guys will have a really consistent, or a really consolidated set of plans that shows all of the changes in one packet submittal. And hope that we can take it up for discussion at that time. The other thing that bears on this, that I'm struggling with a little bit, and I talked to the applicant about it, I know they actually talked to me about it, and I understand their concerns, and that is the question of this contamination on the neighboring lot to the east, and how that bears on this project, and whether, if you have the DNR's written approval, which we did get a letter from the DNR saying that they had reviewed the applicant's road plan. Now, whether it was the final road plan that Naomi has reviewed and approved as to construction details, and whether the DNR is okay with that, I think we know that that is the case, that the design and the construction is acceptable to the DNR without requiring, and Naomi, jump in and
Yeah.
correct me here if I'm wrong, but
I do have some comments about the road, showing the shoulder, specifying, one of my comments was about the grading plan not really matching up with what I would think would be the amount of excavation that would need to take place, and not really knowing the depth of maybe the clay liner. And those kind of comments are in relation to our environmental department who's taking a look at it. And the different aspects of the DNR, that are we getting the approval from the right person at the DNR that we need to get? This would all come from the environmental department that would do the review on the, for that road going through. So that person has started their review, and I talked with them this week. They were gonna finish it up. They were hoping to finish it up before tonight's meeting, but they have yet to have comments. But the comments would be, what sort of information do we need, or is it all there to go forward with an approval and make recommendations based on that? So the road is not, I would say I wouldn't approve the engineering plan for the road at this point, because we have shoulder that needs to be shown. There's some depth, there's a cross section that this is 8-inch base, it needs to be 12-inch base. So there's some questions I have yet on that, and I do understand what I would like, and what I've talked to the environmental person about is the grading of the road. Does the DNR understand the impact? And maybe it's when we get the final plan, it's a call, from our environmental person to the DNR to get on the same page. But we haven't solidified that yet.
so what we have from the DNR at this point is a letter giving approval to the applicant to build that road, but the presumption at the time that letter was written is that road would be built over the top of the existing drive.
no.
No, so it's updated to reflect the other
I
alignment.
sent an email, I copied you, I copied Naomi on it,
Yeah.
sent it to the DNR. He understands exactly what's happening, exactly where the road's going, and he is 100% okay with the new proposed road.
It
Okay,
did,
even without the final construction details? being,
Yeah, he said
Never know.
he understood that there was gonna be some excavation associated with the construction of the new road, and he did not feel would impact the clay liner. Now, talking to our environmental, our Kapoor's environmental manager, there was some, well, we don't really have any documentation on how he made that determination, because the line that we have from a PSI report shows the environmental contamination area all the way up to the lot line. So maybe DNR has additional information to make that determination. And then maybe I talked to him like, oh, maybe you call him and say, oh, how did you make this determination? Everything I've seen shows that, and let's get it for our files so that we have it. Was kind of the last conversation.
There's still work to do
Yeah.
on affirming that the DNR has matched all of our information in your road construction plan, and any questions that we have about where the contamination boundary is. There's a question about whether they've matched all those things and the approval truly is valid. But it raises the question about, in the event it becomes valid, what's the relationship then between, if there's a DNR letter approving that road construction, what is the relationship between the rest of the contamination issue on that site and this project? Do we separate the two and allow them to get moving forward with their road to be built under a DNR letter of approval? My feeling is I would want to hear the village attorney's answer to that question. But we haven't gotten to the point yet of knowing whether we've gotten approval from the DNR. So that's really where this one sits.
We have gotten approval from the DNR.
Whether we've matched up all the information that our village
We have.
engineer is asking to
So-
clarify before that letter is accepted by the village.
I just want to clarify, because I'm a civil engineer, but I'm a municipal stormwater engineer.
Mhm,
So if I ask someone, do they need a permit?
mhm.
If I ask the wetland person, do they need a permit? And they say, no, I can't apply it to a stormwater, I can't apply it to an NOI.
Mhm.
So we're just making sure that our environmental manager understands, he knows all the different permits that are needed and all the different departments that have a say in this type of development. He's just confirming for me that we're addressing the right people. That's what I need him to do, because that's not my wheelhouse.
Okay,
So I just want to explain that to you. I don't think you're lying. I don't think you're misrepresenting.
right.
It's just not my. It's
I
not what
understand
I'm
that, but these are
experiencing.
comments for this month, which then we're not even addressing this month, which means we're gonna address them next month, which means then we need to go back and probably fix things again, so that'll drag on another month. It just,
Well,
how
to
long
be-
is this gonna get drug
To
out?
be fair, this was the first plans that we reviewed with the road on that property.
Well, since last month's meeting is when we decided to do the new road, so,
Right. It
exactly.
just takes time.
I guess if we're getting the okay from the DNR, what more do you want? I mean, if they say it's okay, are you okay to override that, even though that you say how strong the DNRs are, how important they are all the time? Are you saying that they're
I'm
not?
not saying I'm gonna override it. I'm saying I don't have the background to make that decision. I'm asking my colleague who has that background, who has a license to practice in that field, to look at it and say, yeah, we crossed all our i's, we dotted all our t's, this is what we're gonna do.
So it's more important for your guy to be okay with it than the DNR?
No, I think we represent the village, we represent, and we just wanna make sure that we have the right approvals going forward.
But all the time, all these meetings, you always say how stringent and how crazy the DNR is, right? About everything. So when we go to the DNR, and we went through a number of people till we finally got the right person, and now you're telling us that, well, maybe the DNR isn't quite right, we better check it
No.
on our end.
That's not what I'm saying.
That's not?
She's saying they need to reaffirm with the DNR.
I'm saying I don't know what kind of permits or what departments you need to go to, because that's not my specialty. So I want someone in my office to give me that information, say, yeah, they talked to the right person, that's all they need to do.
Okay,
That's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for them to overturn the DNR, I'm just looking to say, yes, they need to talk to Tom Wetland or whoever you did.
and we went through a number
I
of people till we
understand
got to
that
the right
this is
person.
not, this isn't my wheelhouse, that's all I can't practice in environmental engineering per my license. I have
but you
to pass
think-
that on to someone who can.
But you think that an official from the DNR would go out on a limb, even though he's not in charge of this, to go ahead and approve this, not being the right person? You're really confusing me with this.
I'm not gonna speculate on what, I just wanna know, did we go to, do we have the right paperwork in order to move forward with approval? That's all I wanna know. And I'm not qualified to do that, because I don't do this kind of permitting.
I think she's just trying to look out for the village and the taxpayers' best interest.
But it's a double-edged sword with you, or it's, you always tell us how the DNR is like this certain entity, but then when we go this way, I just am very confused.
Okay, so, I don't know how else to explain it.
It wouldn't be the first time that different levels of the DNR bring different decision-making to the same project. The Cajun project is a great example, where certain levels of the DNR were guiding us toward these steps, these action steps,
So-
representing those as requirements. Other levels of the DNR were guiding us to these action steps and representing those as our requirements. So it isn't a perfect science, and
Well, it just
all I
doesn't,
hear that she's attempting to do is clarify that there's no other voice at the DNR that's gonna weigh in on this thing, and also just ask the DNR to clarify. My data says the contamination line is here. Your review would suggest that that's not the case. Can you just confirm for me?
I understand
how we
that.
come to this point?
it just seems like no matter what we do, it's not quite good enough, and there's always one step further that we have to go to do what we have to do. And we're trying to do that. Okay, I know we didn't get all the information in on time,
Right.
but it seems like you guys are fighting us all along here on a freaking $5 million project.
Greg, if we were dealing with this first week of February, which we easily could have been, there was nothing, except maybe something on your end of things, that would have prevented you from getting those plans done and over the first week of February, or even the second week of February. But here we are,
Well, again, there's a lot of moving parts. We got our engineer people that we gotta deal with. It took a long time to get through with this DNR thing. I mean, it's not like, hey, I got a buddy in the DNR. We went through a lot of people to get to the right person to get this approval done. And he was actually getting kind of annoyed with it. Right or wrong?
That's how it is with those guys. You really gotta rattle the ropes. But in any case,
But it's a communication thing on two ends. I mean, me and Warren had, the second week in February, so 2 weeks ago, had a conversation about this whole DNR thing and the whole dump site and everything. And our conversation then was, Kapoor's looking into it. That was over 2 weeks ago. We haven't heard anything since. Like, I'm not getting info back to you because you guys aren't getting info back to me. I'm not getting emails returned to me with the questions that I'm asking you guys for.
Jim, tonight, by just exactly what I said earlier, I'm trying to extract the two issues from each other. I don't know if that can actually be done. My wheelhouse is not environmental, so nothing about the planning process will include that environmental step, except that somebody has to say to me, or to this commission, yes, these issues can be extracted. They go ahead and build that road, and the other issues of contamination and the desire to get that dealt with now can run on its own track, separate and distinct from your project. I'm asking that question tonight. I'm asking the commission, do we want to get to the bottom of that question so that we don't bog you guys down, right?
Right?
From continuing with the condo project on account of something that potentially could move on its own track distinctly. Now, I don't know if that can happen, but I think we need to get an answer to that question. Okay? So that has nothing to do with the details of the building and site plans. Those, you know, those were yours to work with from,
Understandable,
Day
but
after
I
the
had
planning commission
specific
meeting.
questions on stuff that I had asked questions for and I didn't get prompt responses to, which again delayed me in getting stuff to my surveyor. And to, you know, second I was getting stuff back, I was emailing them over for replies to see if these things are right.
what kind of information was I not able to get you?
I don't know, I'd have to go back and look, but, you know, I'd send an email with a couple of questions, hey, you know, I've got this, this, and this, I need this and this, looking for some detail on whatever, and I wouldn't get a response back for 3-4 days at a minimum.
Mm. The only email I haven't responded to from you is the last one that came on Monday with a whole bunch of plans attached to it. And that's because it's just too late. And you know, I bend over backwards to let people bring their materials in at the last minute. Why delay somebody? But, you
Yep.
know, there's a limit.
Understandable.
I got one more question, then we can just move on. So if we get all this in line with the DNR and Kapoor for the road and everything for the next meeting, are we gonna, like Tony brought up, the DNR says, I have nothing to do with that land over, you guys can go ahead and build on it, because it isn't associated with the dump. So are we gonna have that problem then next month? After we get all this done, we're gonna say, hey, we still have to have this, some kind of environmental study done on the dump, which does not affect that property over there?
That's not for me to decide.
Well, that's what I'm
If
just
you
asking the
can't be
board, or-
extracted from each other, we'll find that out. You know, I guess I would say that's a priority for the village at this point, is to find out the answer to that question, is can the two operate separately?
And when do we find that out?
They can, because then all that good work that you've got, you know, done for your condo project, which I think the village, you know, would like to see a nice piece of economic development, can continue to roll.
But when does the village decide this, if this is gonna be, if this can be all one thing, or if they have to be divided, or whatever? At the next meeting? Do you know what I'm saying? We can't get approval to start moving forward when all of a sudden Tony brings up about the environmental problems, right?
Yeah, and rightly so. I mean, that's a massive issue to have.
Well,
an
right, so
environmental
when is that gonna be addressed?
Right there. But the
Right?
point is, Greg, I'm telling the commission that tonight, your project sits on the table from a review for this month. The project details aren't adequate for me to recommend that they take it off the table and have any further discussion. Because what we've gotten from you either came too late to be reviewed in time for the packets, or it wasn't right what you gave us late in the game last week. You know, late last week, I proposed a meeting for Friday afternoon to try and coordinate all of this stuff that you had been piecemealing, and it didn't work out, not on my end, on other end. But what I'm saying is, it needs to stay on the table. But as long as we're on the topic tonight, I thought I would bring up the idea that this commission perhaps pursue a request to the village attorney to find out, can we extract these two issues from each other? So, that's where I'm gonna leave it. I'm taking up way too much of the airspace here.
Do we know the depth of where that clay liner is, the cap? Do you know how deep that is, where that clay is?
We've got testing samples that are approximations from a dig in 2007. Anywhere from 2 to 3 feet in certain areas. And it may not necessarily be a clay cap the entire thing. It wasn't, you know, it was, when I talked to the DNR, he had said, well, it may not be a clay cap. It, you know, some of it may have been clay, but it was covered over.
It's a little bit of a difference. A very large distinct difference between a clay cap that would be considered a cap for a landfill and just kind of covered.
That would be a question for Vernon, not us.
Yeah,
And-
I agree.
And it's, you know, they make, and when I talked to Joe Martinez, who, this is his territory, so that technically is his historic landfill site. And then I talked to Tom Wetland, who reviews and makes the determination whether or not exemptions and whatnot can be done on these specific sites. Both of them said the remediation portion of this may, capping that with an additional clay liner may be part of that remediation. That's their explanation. When that happens, we need the testing to be done before that can even be determined. Which again brings us back to the discussion that we had multiple weeks ago about, we've got an engineer ready to go to continue on doing these tests now. We're just waiting for you guys' okay to say, let's get this done.
Well, I expect that Travis Peterson, who's doing our environmental review, will have comments by next week.
Okay.
And then we'll at least have that as a third party opinion, I guess. For more information, for maybe the attorney's discussion or, you know, the plan commission discussion on if it's separated or not. That may help.
I think that's the information that's critical
Yeah.
for the village attorney to be able to consider.
Yeah. And I expect that next week for sure.
So.
Are we aware of any other gaps in needs from the prior conversations that we've had around this?
With respect to plan details? Yeah.
But you're not sure if they were addressed in the emails that were sent earlier this week?
I did not open the emails that were sent earlier this week because my reports go out on Friday.
I was just trying to understand and clarify if there was other things that they were also needing to work on to kind of parallel at the same time, so all of a sudden we don't get the feedback and then it's like, oh wait, but we still need these other things and that.
That's what
continues.
I'm getting at. I'm
Yeah.
trying, and I understand we got it in late. I got stuff late from the engineer, I got the stuff late from the surveyor. I understand that we can go to next meeting and have all of this stuff in a packet. My concern, his concern is, okay, next meeting we have all of this. Now, this whole dump thing becomes an issue again, and it's tabled based on that. That's what I'm worried about. And then delaying another month, and then having to go back again.
Well, none of us can forecast how it's gonna go. Jamin, you're gonna get another staff report before presumably next month's meeting, as long as, you know, and I encourage you guys, schedule a staff meeting. Let's sit down now, let's go over piece by piece by piece. What were the requirements of your previous staff report? Show us the documents that clean that up,
Mhm.
you know? Boom, 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 get it all in order. We can get you, you know, detailed staff reports again, and maybe there will be 0 conditions. I don't know. But optimistically, we should be able to get to that point where you and staff are 100% in alignment by the time we get to the planning commission.
Mhm.
And Naomi seems to be suggesting that the information that you would expect the village attorney would need to make a decision about separating items should be ready well in advance of next month's meeting.
Well, and I kind of feel like that should have been addressed at last month's meeting, because this was on the table, like, with the attorney, again, the dump road, proposed road, we talked about this extensively last month. You know, and now,
I could not have prepared for that for last month, Gina. The first I knew about.
I'm not saying for last month, I'm saying after last month's meeting, that should have been, what you are talking about today is something that I think should have been addressed right after last month's meeting with the attorney.
It all begins with you having some form of DNR approval. You know, until we see or saw that you had some form of DNR approval saying, yep, you can go ahead and build this road right over the top of a contaminated site. that's the point where I begin to suspect that maybe we can separate these two issues. If the DNR says they're okay, and Naomi can confirm that that's all straight up, maybe we can separate these. So it's not until I saw that letter from the DNR that that prospect even occurs to any of us.
Okay.
We should have something from your environmental engineer next week. I wouldn't imagine it would take the attorney more than a week to filter through that and declare one way or the other, you know, whether we can separate them or not. I think we should look at maybe a staff meeting in 2 weeks,
Yeah.
you know, to dot the i's, cross the t's, to make sure we've got everything ready for next month's planning commission meeting.
I think that was the point I was trying to make, is like separate of what we just talked about related to the lawyers and the feedback from Kapur, the environmental, Travis, you said, right? So outside of that, let's make sure everything else is tightened up, whether it requires a staff meeting or what, so that we don't, it lessens the chance of another hiccup at the next meeting, right? Take the things that you have control over, get them done, then we have these outliers that we're waiting on an answer for. Could it drive something else? You betcha, but again, no crystal ball, we don't know for sure.
I think some of my comments may have been addressed in whatever they sent over Monday or Tuesday. It was crossing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I got a maintenance agreement I can review, I got soil reports I can look at, that crossed. So, there's some of that, but there's still a few things on the plans and small things, I mean, but need to be there.
I also believe that a substantial number of things are going to be cleaned up off my list, but I know there are still plenty of details to get taken care of.
I have just like 2 or 3 just general questions, I guess. Did the soil testing for the retention pond come back?
Yep.
What type of testing was that for? Was that percolation tests or was that?
They do percolation, yeah, I scanned through it. They looked at, percolation, they looked at if it was suitable for infiltration, which they said it was, but we're not doing infiltration because of the nature of the site. They look at where the water level is, groundwater level is like 12 feet below the surface or something like that. I'm gonna misquote it, but it was not a concern. I did quick look at it. Those are in particle sizes, I think they look at.
So infiltration is not going to be considered for that?
Infiltration,
Yeah.
the pond is gonna be lined with clay.
It's gonna be what?
Lined with clay,
Okay.
yeah.
Alright, so it's just gonna be a retention.
Yes,
pond.
it's gonna be a wet retention pond. It's
Okay.
lined with clay all the way around, and the berm, it has a clay core. And
Okay.
it's got a clay collar on the outlet.
Alright, so it's really not gonna percolate down through the bottom?
We are not gonna allow it.
Okay, so then it would just fill up and whenever it fills up, it would overflow and then
Yes.
discharge across the landfill site?
Yeah, it does go that way. That's the natural drainage of it. So it goes towards that same way, towards the road, towards the entrance. Yep.
Is there going to be any further studies done to see how that's gonna impact the landfill site?
That, my environmental engineer is looking at that and making
Okay.
some recommendations.
The next question I have, in some of the documents, is there a well inside the Kwanzaa hut? Like a potable well, water?
There's one outside, not inside, but
Outside.
for it, yes.
Okay, is that the one that you're going to use for feed to the different, you're gonna drill it?
We're drilling a whole new well up on the north or southwest corner.
Okay, so that well will be abandoned?
Abandoned, yep,
Okay,
100%.
so then basically the only 2 wells would be the new one that you put in, and then the one that feeds to the house there on Big Bend Drive?
Correct.
Okay,
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just,
I'm not sure that's clear that the well in the Quonset hut's gonna be abandoned, so we should make sure that's clear on the construction plan.
Okay.
yeah, I just, I didn't know that there was a second well there at the Kwanzaa hut, and that's why I was wanting clarification if that's how that was gonna go. So that was my 2 questions I had.
And two, I was the one that dug the test holes last week, for the retention pond. So I was the machine operator for
PSI.
PSI. We went down and we dug some holes, again, just for ease of mind, I guess, more than anything. We dug down probably 20 to 25 feet off the lot line on the dump side. We went down 15 feet and found nothing but pure gravel. There was no, any sign of anything, debris, contamination, anything, any weird lines in the soils, nothing. You know, it was clear, and that was 20 feet off the lot line.
Then on the landfill side?
Yes,
Oh, wow.
correct, nothing. And we went down as deep as my machine would go.
Okay.
He tested to 12 or 13 feet, I believe. But,
Yeah, I
but
think
we
further
still
in the
done,
back.
you
They
know,
didn't take any soil samples for any hazardous substances though, right? They were just doing it for percolation tests?
correct. And the same guy that did those percolation tests is the same guy that's been doing all the environmental engineering and the soil testing. So we had talked about it when we were there, and he seemed to have no concern with over there.
Whenever the road, hypothetically, if everything goes as planned, the road that would be put across the landfill, that's going to be considered a private road? And ownership would be retained through the CSM, the variance, or, I'm sorry, I'm not using the terminology correct, but that would basically go back to the common ownership of the
Association of
association?
condominium owners.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
So hypothetically, down the line, if something would happen and the landfill site would have to be remediated, that road would either have to partially come out or come out to get down underneath it to remove soil or anything else like that. That would be the responsibility of the condominium owners association?
Kind of a legal question.
We are putting a full disclosure in the condo docs that it is in proximity to the landfill. That was a suggestion of, I think, the village attorney and ours, and we're gonna submit it, and, you know, as you guys had, or should have had documentation, we're gonna do the same thing with disclosures in our condo docs as well.
Good.
If nobody motioned or makes a motion to take it off the table, then nothing happens. You can just,
Yeah, it just pushes.
and if you feel like you're done with your discussion, you can just move on to the next agenda item.
Anybody else have any questions?
I mean, as many questions as you guys have for us that we can note down, that we can take care of, so that we don't have continuing questions next month, would be greatly appreciated.
I think, like, you know, before, like I said, I think the key is getting the feedback from these two, from what you sent earlier this week. And as soon as you get that feedback, circle back with answers to try to get ahead of that game so that we can get that staff meeting, like Warren suggested, in 2 weeks to iron out any, you know, leftover items to bring this thing to the table again with as clean a slate as possible. Do you guys have any other questions? No motion needed?
Great, yep, we'll move along. Item 3C, review, discussion, and consultative feedback as to off-site signs proposed to be located along State Highway 164, Big Bend Drive, and Edgewood Avenue, both as temporary, coming soon / now available type signs, and/or as future permanent project identification signs proposed in support of the applicant Jamin Peterson, doing business as Lake Park Storage Condos LLC. Request to develop a 42-unit self-storage small business condominium project on 4.11 acres of land located north and east of State Highway 164, Big Bend Drive, at Edgewood Avenue, excluding direct frontage on either. The prospective location along State Highway 164 is Zone B3 General Business District, and a prospective location along Edgewood Avenue is Zone R3 Residential.
No new information received on that, so if you guys want that to be a part of actionable discussion next month. Get down to the details from the staff report of last month about showing precisely what setbacks and the offsets and square footage and height and illumination and all of those details will be for any of these signs. If you want to get up.
Don't think we have any action on that.
It's just
Consultative feedback. Yeah.
we got consultative feedback.
Great.
Into old business.
All right, we'll move along to item 3D. Review, discussion, possible action whether to go back to the developer of Ripplebrook West and request that he now follow through with installation of a streetlight at his arrangement and expense at the intersection of Ripplebrook Court and Henneberry Avenue.
Right. So the village attorney did give us an opinion, and his opinion is that yes, the village is authorized to go ahead and invoke that requirement on the developer, even at this late stage in the game. He did also say in there that the village can waive off that requirement by an action of the village board. Okay? So the Public Safety Committee didn't want this thing back unless the feeling of the Planning Commission was that we either, if we want to recommend that that streetlight go forward, then it should just go straight on to the village board for their recommendation and get the communications rolling, requiring him to follow through and get that light installed. Alternatively, if you feel like you want to waive that streetlight off, you can send it back to Public Safety, where they said they would consider that decision and make a recommendation to the village board. Okay? So that's where this stands.
So we can make a decision of yes or no here. If it's yes, it would go to the board. If it's no, it would go to public safety. And if they say yes, it would go to the board, and if they say no, then it would be a no issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I guess my question would be, are we gonna require a streetlight at Ripplebrook East?
The next phase.
And then are we gonna have two streetlights, 2 blocks apart, and none at the main intersection?
The main intersection of,
Henneberry West.
yeah, that's unfortunately not our issue. That would be a plan.
Well, that, and again, it's a proximity thing, but we're dealing with new development where we have that control through the development agreement and the engineering designs to ask them to put in such streetlights. We can't say, hey, go 2 blocks down the road just because it doesn't have one and put one up there. So yeah, it's unfortunate there isn't one there. I understand that point. But you also don't have a concentration of a subdivision right on top of that intersection. You mean right at it, right?
Right.
Here we're dealing with a concentrated phase 1 and now phase 2 of a collection of homes that are likely to have children that will have bus pickups. And I know we've heard some arguments about lighting there and how long they're sitting, and that's all well and fine. What I get hung up on is the fact that when this thing was approved back in quite a while ago, in the documentation it stated a light is required. And we asked for the follow-up. Shame on the board at that time or the individuals involved that they didn't continue to push that and prod and say, hey, it's in the documents, you need to get this done. And it just got forgotten. Now it's become a topic again. Legal has spoken, saying based on the project continuing, we do have legal grounds to still hold that requirement.
Not even based on the project continuing.
Well,
Even
it
if
said
there
that
was
was
no
one of
other Ripplebrook.
correct. No, yeah, correct. But the current project, the other one's still kind of considered open, as was his terminology, because otherwise there's statute of limitations.
Yeah.
So he was saying that he had an argument of saying the statute of limitations don't apply based on the situation, and that's what I was getting at, from a legal standpoint.
Yeah.
I live in a subdivision where everybody has a street, or a lamp post, right, Tony? We all have a lamp post, and that did not relinquish them from having, we don't, it didn't say we didn't need a street light at the entrance of the subdivision where the roads cross, right? So, to me, that was one of the arguments that was brought up previously, it's like, oh, well, as a developer, if I put a street lamp in every lot, then that's enough lighting no, not technically in my mind, I live in a subdivision, that's not the case either, so, I just wanted to reiterate that, cause that was brought up as a potential counter argument of not needing it. We know how much light those street lamps put off for the in front of the house, it's not,
Not much.
no, it's enough to illuminate your driveway just a little bit. I guess my personal opinion is that we stand on the documentation and that it was originally signed upon and agreed upon back in 2000, I forget the year. Six?
Yeah.
Like I said, it's a shame we're dealing with this now. It should have been just done with way back then and this wouldn't even be on our table.
I'd be inclined to agree, just because I'm a big believer in precedents. If you do not follow through with this stuff, you set precedents for the next development, and the next development, and the next development, where they just say, oh, you know what, they didn't put that light up there, I'm not gonna put it up. And
Yeah.
we'll just wait for it to move on down the road, and we won't have to do it. I mean, it's,
I think because it was dictated in the documentation the way that it was, I mean, it makes sense for the developer to put the bill. Why should it become the residents now? Why should it be their burden? When
Right.
It should have been done in the first place before they even bought their lot.
is it my understanding then that the developer, when everything was put all together, that they brought all this to the planning commission and it was decided that there would be a light there and the developer agreed to it?
That was in the very beginning, yeah, before it was even developed, that was part of, that's what we're talking about.
2006, it was 12 years before the site even started to be developed.
Yeah, like I said, I
But
mean,
there was 2 demand letters, one in.
it's always a slippery slope, right? I mean, once you start giving out free passes on stuff, it just, you know, where does it stop, I guess?
Yeah.
So, that would be my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's just, you've heard my opinion, I'll turn that into a motion. That at this point, we go back to Stiza and the developer and ask him to uphold his obligation from the original documentation and agreement to put that light in for his cost.
And I'll second that.
Any further discussion? We want to allow him any amount of time. You want to allow him to put both in at the same time.
Sure, I think there's.
Wait a minute, no. The reason this thing is still out here 15 years later is
Sure.
because it took them that long to get around to getting all these books,
Right.
the properties done. We're not gonna wait another 15 years till we get 2 lights?
Yeah.
I don't think we wanna do that.
True, but I mean, obviously, he was in a consultative approach for a long time before he
Oh,
started the
yes.
project, right?
Yeah?
That's different compared to phase
But
2
don't,
where
let's
he's.
not tie the two things.
I know, I'm just
together.
saying, phase 2, he's
Mhm.
closed that gap a lot quicker because of the development activity. I'm not
Right.
saying it's an excuse, I'm just saying, I understand why the timeline was dragged out the first time because of
Oh,
the
yeah.
economic conditions and all that jazz, but I think you're right, I mean, he's been given plenty of time and this thing's been kicked down the road too long, so, no, I think we figure out what's a reasonable amount of time and make that a requirement.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. So, are you guys, how will we follow up what happens next month's meeting or what?
We'll end up sending a letter out to Mr. Stiza explaining to him the situation, that he needs to put a street light in, and I'll ask the attorney what a reasonable amount of time is, if it's, 30 days or 90 days or whatever, but I don't know how long the Energy's is running on an install either, if they can put one up right away, or, if you're on the list.
Well, she's one of the residents on the corner, so I just asked her, sorry to throw you out there. I just asked her, about placement of the light. I mean, there's 2 houses that aren't really keen on this, right? So, I choose the other house. Sorry.
The other house that's not represented tonight?
No, I would say it if he was here, with all the disrespect I got, so is there somebody that comes out to survey it, to see where it would go, or how does that work? Do you guys just,
We don't decide that, I mean, we leave that up to
We
them.
Energies.
We Energies.
oh, I
they
see,
have,
okay, so
public
probably
right of
really
way.
nearest light pole, or electrical pole would be,
Yeah.
okay.
I think it wouldn't hurt you to try and make a contact, either to WEPCO or to the developer and ask that he make this communication to WEPCO, that they use house side shields if they can to minimize the amount of light that's gonna impact their residents.
For those, specifically, obviously, those two lots that are closest to, they can shield the light to try to direct it more so on that intersection and not necessarily
Yeah.
bleed out as far towards the houses.
Yeah, I mean, we wanna all be considerate of them, you know, it does. We like her.
And again, I think,
Yeah. We're actually gonna go have drinks after this, I think, no. No, but yeah, so.
I think, you know, again, I think we could even pass that feedback along to Stiza, the developer, when we send him this letter, you know, encourage him to, upon installation, ask the utilities to put those in.
Sure.
as
Can
part
you
of it.
require that?
That's a good question. Probably not, because that, again, wasn't necessarily in the book, right, or in that developer's agreement, you know, because that's what we're sticking to right now, is that there was a light pole being in, but it didn't say that it was gonna have those shields on it. So, tomato, but it's hard to enforce that one, since it wasn't dictated and signed upon originally.
But if you just kind of throw it in the letter, maybe,
Yeah, you know,
Okay.
we'll obviously, they'll be aware of that feedback.
perfect.
Especially because the light is coming in now after the houses are established, they're built, they're occupied. I think that would be a good way to state it.
I think it's pretty feasible.
Yeah.
And streetlight technology bulbs have gotten a lot brighter
Yeah,
since
for sure.
the 2006 agreement, 'cause they're not the high pressure sodium anymore, they're LED. And those are brighter.
If I understand it correctly, the LED lights can be directed a lot
Right, that's
more
what we're talking about.
precisely than
Yeah.
the older lights can.
Yes, they are.
So I guess, yeah, we would just all, maybe, or somebody you discuss with We Energies, if somebody can catch them out there and just say, hey, could you guys, you know? So we can do that for it. To keep the pace.
Cool.
All right, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a good night. Moving along, item 4, new business, review, discussion, possible action on the report back from the village board as to certain sections of the recently recommended chapter 16 zoning code redraft.
Right, so this is that long-standing issue on Douglas Court with getting the project built according to specifications. I'll let Naomi take over, but basically what's being asked is.
Wait, oh, we skipped.
We skipped.
Oh, where are we?
Are we gonna skip? We could.
The zoning 16,
I guess it doesn't matter.
You-
Naomi's sticking around for both anyway, then.
I'm committed.
I don't think it matters. This is the kickback from the board to us again.
1151, back page, South 91 West, to selected call, monitor, frequency, 1, tone.
Hit the right button.
It was good timing, actually. I need to get the connection lead here. So the village board reviewed the zoning code, and they raised a couple of issues that they wanted to send back for the planning commission to consider. And you have a couple of options. You can either take action to accept all of their changes, you can take an action to do nothing at all in response to their recommendation for changes, or you can take an action or make a recommendation back to them that you are opposed to the changes. In any case, they will have the final say. Let's see here.
Fair one.
Well, I don't know if this is, let's see. But one of the most significant changes that they have proposed is that we remove the R4 residential district, which is the district that, number one, requires that sanitary sewer first be available to serve a project, and number two, has lot sizes as small as 15,000 square feet. So the feeling of the village board was that 15,000 square feet is just too far out of step with the village's really rural character, even though we have the village element in the downtown area, in-town area. It really doesn't comport with the more rural character of new development. So that's one thing for you to consider. One of the other changes that they had requested was that the village consider, that the planning commission consider increasing the offset requirements between industrial and commercial type uses when they abut residential zoning districts. So as it's written right now, and I'm gonna try and zoom down to one of those districts. I don't think the B1 and the B2 were big issues. In the B3 district and the B4 district, we have 20-foot side and rear yard offsets. This is the B3 district. And that would be, for instance, the zoning of the property that the condominium project is proposed on, the storage condominium project, okay? So they have a 20-foot offset requirement, and they do abut residential. And in the B4 district, where more intensive type uses, including these crossover office / light industrial buildings can be located, we have a 20-foot offset from the side and the rear lot lines. The board didn't specifically identify a target number that they thought was appropriate. They thought the planning commission might want to tackle that question. So I guess the question is, and then the same would be true of the industrial district. Do you want to establish a higher offset requirement between those three districts and adjoining residential zoning or adjoining residential use? Sometimes they're not always one and the same. And if so, what number would you like to set that to?
So in other words, they want a higher number than 20?
A bigger,
Yeah.
a bigger buffer.
I want a bigger separation, yeah.
As a person who lives right next to one, my house backs up onto an industrial site. I think actually the 20 is probably a good number. It gives anybody who lives alongside us an opportunity to put a barrier closer to the lot line, rather than having to move a shed, an extra 25 or 30 feet in the middle of your property to basically doesn't give you any of the buffer that you need between them. I don't know why they want to need any further away than 20 feet, quite honestly.
They're not talking about, the recommendation wasn't to impact the residential lot, it was the business lot.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then I guess I understood it to be the residential people, the residential.
Just where it butts up against residential, so in your case, where your lot line is, residential here, industrial here,
All right.
instead of them having a 20-foot setback, the recommendation
I
is
thought
it needs
that
to be more than 20.
We had discussed that it was going to be big enough for vehicles to get between the industrial area and the residential area to drive around just in case they had to, fire trucks and such. And it could
That's
be,
that 20-foot number.
Yeah,
Right.
that's where
20
that
feet
came
is that,
from.
kind of that minimum number.
So this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is really where a lot of that discussion was drawn from, where we have industrial butting right up against residential,
What
without
happens
much
here?
barrier between the two. What's that? Yeah. But this is undeveloped as of now, and I think we're trying to set the precedence for
yeah, it actually
further
here
developments.
and here.
Right. I was gonna say, we have it right by us, huh?
I was using this as undeveloped lands. I mean, hard to go back and try to tear down buildings and redo
Right.
things from the past, but
One of the thoughts I had, and I don't know how the board would react to this, but I wondered, we talked a lot about wanting to have certain levels of flexibility at the planning commission level for different types of development projects. And what if we maintained that 20-foot, but put in a provision that basically said the planning commission may require
Additional based on the scenario.
additional offset distance, if it's deemed necessary based on the,
Type of construction or business and the matchup between the two properties, yeah.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, because I agree, like in your case, in certain situations, 20 feet might be enough, right? Depending on what the land use is, what the building is that's in that industrial space or business spot, but
Mhm.
that does give us some flexibility to allow the 20 if it seems like it's a fair amount, but yet then also go to a larger number if we feel it's justified.
Some
Based on-
developers might prefer to put in a dense screen or a solid fence, as a barrier, and that might be
Like
better
an offset.
solution to the distance.
Sure,
Than just distance alone. So it's something to consider, but I don't want to box you in either, so.
No, I mean, that's a valid point, right? If somebody wants to save some of their land for what they're developing and would rather use the 20 and put a fence up or, some kind of privacy screening there to help buffer instead of using a 30-foot offset, I mean, I could see some developments trying to do that to save that extra 10 feet. So I think that is kind of an interesting point. What was the other feedback that we had from the board side, outside of that setback? You said the sewer district, which, R4, which again, I don't even,
Minimum lot sizes.
do you remember the story behind the R4? You or Mike?
Yeah, that was so that you could get more density into the subdivision,
Sure.
if they had sewer.
If they had sewers.
But we don't have sewer.
But that's the key, so yeah, we created this district, but we've never, the zoning, but we've never used it, it doesn't really apply to anything we really have. So,
Unless you have sewer,
yeah, but even then,
then you could get more density.
we can tackle that at that time too, if we feel it's needed, right?
Because a lot of the newer subdivisions, like in the surrounding areas, was the thought, like in Vernon, there's some more dense, people wanted smaller lots, big houses on little lots, this to take care of. And with the sewer, you could get the density and have that, it's per desire, whatever.
It allows for pretty efficient design
Yeah,
too,
sure.
you can really,
Maximize
cluster
that.
the connections on a short length of road
Right,
and
and certain people like small lots, and
True, but but when you really look at it demographically, here inside the village, outside of the lots that are along 164, that corridor, let's say, that are traditionally the smaller ones, outside of that, most times we're not producing those types of developments anymore as far as that small development. Vernon, same thing. Vernon, I mean, you go to do a development in Vernon and you're gonna have
For the
an
most
acre,
part,
an acre plus, you're not gonna see those really
but you
small
see
lots.
it in town, Waukesha has.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah,
agreed,
Waukesha has it.
agreed, but I don't,
In New Berlin, I would believe would probably have that.
we've just never been, neither us nor Vernon have really never played in that box, right, of wanting that smaller lot size. And again, I understand why it was provisioned back then, thinking
Right.
maybe it was gonna be possible, but we haven't really seen any evidence to support that up to this point,
No.
so,
It's
That's-
nothing that we can use just because you don't have sewer.
yeah. So that's why I didn't, on the board side, I didn't have any problem with that one, that made some sense to strike that for now, and if it needs to be brought up in some future date, then we address it, but to remove that now is.
Okay,
I'm sorry, go ahead. You did, Jen.
That was-
I'm just gonna say, just to go back to the setbacks.
Yeah.
Do we have, like, what other villages or townships or whatever, what are they using as a standard? Are they using 20 feet as well?
well,
Or is it, like, I'm just trying to find, like, where's the happy median, right? Like, if Muskego has industrial that butts up against residential, and let's say theirs is 30 feet, and ours is 20, and Vernon's is 25, you know what I mean?
right. So 20 is very typical. And what most codes generally will say about when you butt up to residential is that you must maintain the more restrictive of the two offset requirements. In the village of Big Bend, the residential offset is 20 feet and the industrial offset is 20 feet. That is not uncommon.
Okay.
But higher offsets tend to be landmongers. because that's your side and your rear lot lines, and those can really become, you do have open space requirements.
Right.
So if you're getting above and beyond your open space requirements by requiring these very large offsets, you know, then you're kind of doubling down on the developability, on taking away some of the developability of the lot.
Usability of the lot,
Yeah. So 20 feet is not uncommon for an industrial offset requirement. 20 feet's not unusual for residential. Most codes say the more restrictive of the two. They oftentimes wash like ours do. Sometimes, you know, certain districts, in another village that I work for, I know that the residential district has 35 feet rear and side yards. So if an industrial user builds next to them, they have to maintain that 35 foot on their side too.
I know in the past, at one time, I talked with my neighbor up the street, Joe, and I think there had been some concern about some of the houses, or some of the residential houses on the other side of Guthrie there, that setbacks, if the setbacks are only 20 feet, that you have the potential to have, you know, a larger office building or something like that, you know, right 20 feet off your property, you know.
And speaking of Badger Trail, yeah.
Right, I think that's the concern, so I don't know, like I said, do we wanna have a special consideration for that? Because I know, looking at, like, when you guys wrote out B1, 2, and 3, it's specific in the code that any development will kind of blend or mesh with the existing area, but then with, like, B4 and higher, that kind of requirement is taken out. But we only have a couple little spots like this, if I'm not mistaken, right? So I don't know if, like I said, if you guys wanna, I think probably a good idea to have some kind of flexibility where you can take it on a case-by-case basis, maybe? Because it's not like we have 1,000 sites like this,
No.
where it would be a rabbit hole to try to manage and work through all of them. But,
I think Mary's suggestion has a lot of merit to it, because it does give us that flexibility based on the situation that we're talking about at that time, based on, again, so Joe's scenario, or the feedback from Joe, where he's talking about Badger Trail, you betcha.
right,
If you have this huge business park or industrial building right behind in that gray area where it would be abutting Badger Trail, you know, or actually it's that yellow piece, right? So just underneath that gray, you have the yellow. Yeah.
that,
So-
I think that was kind of the concern, that you had some, and again, I mean,
Right now, that's
you put
platted
it
as
in
harvest.
perspective, you got some pretty expensive houses over there, and we're talking about setbacks and, you
Yeah,
know.
so that's platted as harvest view right now. Obviously, the intention is that, you know, if everything was to go as they would hope as far as that development, is that would be rezoned into that B4.
Sure.
So then that would be industrial or light manufacturing type of buildings right there abutting up to Badger Trail.
Correct.
So,
And there's no buffer zone here to bring it to a B anything, it's industrial abutting right against residential, there's no offsetted corridor through there. This up here has a little bit better of a buffer between these two, just simply because you have, what is it, B3?
yeah.
B3 against
Power
residential.
line running right through there.
Right.
Yeah,
So
so
you've got
that's
a
kind of its
natural-
own buffer.
Yeah, so this is, hypothetically, this is gonna be our.
One of the
biggest-
worst case scenarios essentially,
Right.
right?
Right.
But again, to have that flexibility to say, yeah, it's at 20, but based on what we think, what the future ends up bringing to that parcel, we could then dictate, hey, whoever that developer is, if it's the one in question that we've talked about or not, you know, say that the requirements for a setback is gonna be larger because of that residential need right next door. It's gonna be bigger than that 20. After we know what kind of business or space is gonna occupy that lot or that development.
We'd like to put a ceiling number in there so that developers who are considering a project in the village can
Well,
look
the
at
worst
that
case
provision and
scenario?
go, wow, so it's whatever they decided is, that's crazy. My thought is that we would cap it at 35 feet, which is the height, the maximum height of a building in that district, in those districts. So just to match scale to distance.
From your experience with some of the other villages, that you've been involved with, 35 is usually the max that you've seen?
I don't usually see 35 in industrial. Again, it's, you know, my other villages are Pewaukee, and Slinger. And in those cases, we're not seeing a ton of new industrial development butting up against residential. So I don't think it's become an issue yet. But the way they're written is 20-foot offsets, side and rear, for industrial and commercial type uses, and the more restrictive of the two, which doesn't amount to anything.
Right.
Difference.
So, you know, stuff like this comes up really kind of on an as-needed basis.
Is that leaving it too loose if we put it in as a needed basis?
No, but she's still saying, so a minimum is still the 20,
Right.
or the most restrictive is 35,
Right, and that's
the
what I'm,
least is 20, and there's flexibility to work within those numbers based on the
and
scenario.
I'm just asking, is that too loose for us to be able to leave it like that in the codes?
No, I think it's reasonable to put in that the planning commission may require additional offset
Up to a max.
up to a maximum of 35 feet total.
Okay.
If it's determined that I'll have to figure out some
Surrounding
verbiage.
residential areas negatively impacted by
Right.
a lesser amount of footage, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Whatever that verbiage is.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I think we kick that back up to the board with that recommendation.
Are there other communities that use this language that you have? I'm just wondering, do you set yourself up for like a legal issue? Because a lot of it's gonna be based on personal opinion,
Yeah, you're right.
so that would be my concern.
It will be. It'll be held to the same standard that they would hold us to in the case where we attach a condition to a conditional use permit, where it has to be a measurable impact, right? It has to be clearly identifiable. The character of the impact has to be measurable and bona fide.
So long story short, for us to go more than 20 feet, we better have some really good ammunition to justify why we're asking for more than 20 feet,
Right.
the gist of it.
So if you were to go to a hard and fast standard, that one's crystal clear.
Right.
And if you wanted to go that route, then what higher number might you be recommending for the village board to consider?
And they gave no feedback on what their recommendation was, they just tossed it back to us.
We're the experts.
So I rely on the trustees in the room to.
They're like, no, we're not gonna suggest what that number is. How about they figure it out?
I didn't leave it tonight, that says commissioner.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be unreasonable to establish 30 as an absolute. You know, you are trying to ensure that the residences that abut these lands don't get squeezed in.
I just like that flexibility though. Like you said, if
Yeah.
somebody wants to spend the money on a fence or a privacy barrier or some sort, and that allows them to do 20 feet because they're using that buffer, it seems hard, I would have a hard time saying, hey, wait, you wanna spend more money developing this thing to help? Cause that's gonna be a lot better than just having 10 feet of open space. You know what I mean? If we tell them it's 30 feet versus 20, if they want 20, their stipulation is they're spending some money to put in a real good barrier. If they're gonna do that, to me, that's better for the resident than leaving it 10 extra feet of distance. And that's why I like that flexibility, so that if somebody really wants to throw some money at that solution and still want the 20 feet, we make them work for it. That's kind of why I like that opinion to that, you know.
Well, I can kind of draft both options and I guess leave it up to the board to decide how they want to, unless you prefer to go back with a specific decision out of the commission. And not let them know about what we talked about.
In my opinion, we almost have to bring back a specific recommendation.
Yeah, I don't want to give
Otherwise,
choices.
it's going to get into discussion of, well, why did they leave this open to us?
Why did they give us
Sure.
2?
Right.
I like the options.
To give the
I thought the
flexibility.
Give
original
the planning
recommendation,
commission-
I thought the original recommendation there, if I'm not mistaken, there was, you know, it starts at 20
Yeah,
with our discretion up to 35.
yeah. Yeah, he was bringing up concern of whether or not that, so there's there's a gray area there, like, okay, why did you personally tell this developer that it had to be 30? How do we prove to them why we felt the need of 30 versus 20 versus 25 versus whatever, and that potential legal component of somebody fighting us on why are you treating me different, and how can you prove to me
How do you
that
measure
30
that
feet?
decision?
How do you prove to me 30 feet is needed versus wanted? So, yeah, I think ultimately, I think it does, the flexibility option does give us the best scenario, best weapon in the drawer, so to speak, but sure, there's always that outlier, that risk that somebody could try to challenge it. We just gotta make sure that if we go beyond that and we're leveraging more than 20 feet, that we cross our Ts on the justification of why.
And I also, and that's kind of where I was going with, is that too loose to leave? I'm on board with you on that, Christopher. I do believe that if there is a challenge, that they would have to come back with a good reason why, as well as what you said, Kelly, that we need to come with all of our T's crossed and I's dotted. There's got to be an even mix between the two, unless there's going to be continued friction into the future between those two zones, between the residential and the businesses, and that's not going to go away. There's got to be some give and take through there to make sure that we have it adjusted properly. If we have that flexibility to go 20 or with recommendations and reasonings, solid reasoning behind it, to go to 35, my personal opinion gives us that reason, that ability to sit down with the developer and discuss, the common ground, to make sure that we have enough ground between the two, the residential and the business or industrial side of it. I like it. I like the flexibility in it.
Just to be a thing in the book, what if you reversed it and we put 35 with the option of going to 20 and make it on their end to prove to us why they could go down to 20?
Put that on its head.
Yeah.
We got time, right? But, I mean, and then I would say that throws the responsibility on the developer to say, this is why I think it should be 20. Like you said, if they want to put a fence there or green space or whatever development to make it, better on the residents, and let him go that shorter distance.
Well,
That's a great.
with that being said too, we could almost, hypothetically, it wouldn't have to be the same across the board for industrial or if it's B1, B2, B3, correct?
Yeah.
Because our rub here, I don't really foresee us gaining more land, and our big rub is going to be this, where we have industrial butting up against residential. Secondarily, there's going to be some.
Yeah, any of that red and yellow, the B4s and stuff, anywhere that, but like you said, we're a village, we're not landlocked, so we don't get more land from Town of Vernon because they're a village. We don't get more land from Town of Waukesha because they're a village.
Yeah.
The only time we get more land is by combining communities at this point.
If that's gonna be our biggest and possibly only rub, where we're going to have to do this, I actually kinda like that idea of putting it 35. Strictly stating whenever industrial or our B4 butts up against residential.
But give them the option, but give them the option of flexibility to a lesser restrictive if they provide site improvements to help buffer accordingly.
Okay.
It'll be interesting how to word that, but.
Right. And
Because that.
what's it gonna do to all the pre-existings? I can't say that I know what all the pre-existing offsets and setbacks are for like the wind drive and the industrial
Grandfathered in
avenue.
under the laws that they were established with. So I
Right.
assume.
Right. No, now, if they met the 20, but they don't meet the 35, we're gonna put a bunch of them into that legal non-conforming classification, but they're all in legal non-conforming already for various other reasons, really.
Well, that's where I guess in the wording would get interesting, but if you have industrial butting up against industrial, like you have a site here and a site here, it wouldn't necessarily have the 35-foot rule. If you have industrial against B4 or B3, it wouldn't necessarily have that 35-foot.
Yeah, I don't think those are what the, I don't know, what the board was talking about?
The board was primarily concerned about the residential butting up
Yeah,
next to it.
that's what I'm saying, industrial, 20 foot, industrial, business, 20 foot, business, 20 foot,
It's only.
industrial or business to residential, 35 unless you can prove it down to 20.
Yeah, so however the verbiage would need to be to support that option,
I don't know.
to a lesser restriction with site improvements to offset the loss of distance.
Got it.
Everybody on board with that one?
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
Nice. Throw it on there. Okay. So you have the setback thing figured out. Everybody was in agreement with removal of the sewer district. What was the other feedback? Was there any other feedback? I thought so too.
Yeah, so.
So that would be the full R4 being removed from there? Now,
From the codification, yeah.
just a question, does that just create more legwork? Let's say, way down the road or something, sewer comes in or something like that, they have to start from scratch?
No, because I mean, even if sewer came in, it doesn't mean you have to create a zoning district for it.
Okay.
You know, the reason that's what I was asking Paul and Mike
Right.
about is that what the premise was behind that. So the thought was is that may create an option to develop an area that would be specifically coded that way for a smaller lot, knowing that they were gonna leverage the sewer, and as Mary mentioned, the efficiency pumps and all that jazz. We don't have anything like that.
Right.
You know, 10 years ago when it was thought about, maybe there was a possibility, but when you look at the land use and how things are stacking up, it really seems unlikely more and more now, right? That we would have something that would fit that.
So interestingly, that R4 district was created before this code update began.
Yeah,
It was created before we did this
it was probably 6-7 years ago.
on the prospect
Yeah.
of sewer coming
Mhm.
and what would we like to make sure is available if that happens. So it's sitting out there, it's a PDF, it's never gonna go away. The R4 district was created by its own ordinance, by the village board, by planning commission recommendation to the village board. So we can resurrect that district anytime.
If needed.
Yeah, we did that for what, B3 or B4, just a couple of years ago, didn't we make the recategorization of that? Or am I,
Thinking of something different.
yeah,
You're thinking of maybe the description around the use inside of the zoning district? That was
I
redone.
think it was.
That was redone, but not like the district as a whole, like this R4 was. This R4 was like sprung up out of nothing to say, hey, let's provision a new district. Back after we put the pipe in the ground, or around the same time with the pipe going in the ground, which was years and years ago.
Yeah, we've done various amendments to the B3 in the course of
Maybe that's what that was,
the
yeah.
last few years.
So we need a motion for this?
Do we? Yeah, possible action. I guess I'll make that motion to move forward with those two recommendations back to the board, related to their feedback.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 4B, review, discussion, and possible action on a plan that revises the stormwater management / site design plan for the Glen Echo Douglas Court development by B&M Development in care of Mike Khan. Now,
This is Naomi's baby. She's been working really hard to
I
get
don't know
this
if I'd
site
call it a
finished
baby.
for once and for all. My only comments are, so there's an amendment now that's been approved by the DNR, an amendment to the stormwater management plans, and it has been reviewed and recommended for approval by Naomi. And the planning commission needs to agree to that change being incorporated as part of the project development plan. The questions I have are with respect to ensuring that this gets done. So now we had those two agreements. We had a development agreement and we had a stormwater management agreement with the developer that never got signed. They were approved by the village board, and the village attorney has said that they are enforceable documents for us. So the question I raise in my report is, should we get them signed at this point? But I'm not sure that that's necessary. If he already feels that it's enforceable.
Enforceable.
Okay? So, another question that comes up is, will there be any continuing inspection that's going to occur as a part of these changes? Or are we gonna require as-built documents be filtered back in? You probably have a set of conditions that you would recommend.
Yes.
So I'm gonna just jump off right there.
I think last week or last month, maybe you saw like the same set of plans that aren't quite finished, but these are the new set of plans. The grading of the pond has kind of gone around the corner to allow for some more space between the lot one and the wet bottom part of the pond. The plans have been looked at by the DNR. I verified specifically with Peter Wood that he saw the same exact plans that I anticipated he saw. So we had a conversation to verify that he looked at those revisions and he approved them. We had a meeting after the last plan commission with Mr. Khan, the developer, and Paul Van Hinklem to discuss these plans, some issues, how are we gonna construct the pond, what needs to be done with the shouldering, pavement, what needs to be updated with the stormwater maintenance plan, needs to be signed and recorded. We went through a bunch of items. On Friday the 29th, I followed up with meeting notes to make sure we were all on the same page, February 1st. At that time, we requested for the packet for you guys tonight to have a DNR correspondence, which was included in your packet, signing off on the new set of plans, and changes to the construction plan to use the current road names, Douglas Court and John Drive. I noticed the title page did not get changed, but the names labeled throughout the plans have been changed. We got those on February 11th. On February 15th, I wrote up my engineer's recommendation for approval that you see in your packet. I have a condition upon as-built information being reviewed and approved by the village prior to acceptance. The stormwater maintenance plan, which has not been recorded, must be updated to include the changes of the pond location and, so the stormwater maintenance plan needs to be signed and recorded. The other condition I would like you to consider, which is not in my memo, is construction of the pond consistent with Wisconsin DNR Technical Standard 1001, which is a wet bottom basin design. And the reason why I want to add that to my conditions is this set of plans is somewhat supplemental to the first set, which had a cross section of the pond. So they're lacking some of the detail that the first set had that is called out in our technical standard, which is referenced by our ordinance. So our ordinance references the technical standard. Just having our approval conditional upon that will mean that when we have our pre-con tomorrow, we can talk about the liner that needs to be in, when that's going to be done, and specific construction of the pipes is called out in the technical spec. Since the plans were lacking a little bit of detail when I reviewed them today. So tomorrow we do have a pre-construction meeting. They intend to start construction probably next week, I'm assuming. And then going forward to construction, I talked with our construction management team. Mike Timmers and Tammer have the ability to do construction management on the project. Some of the things that would be typical that we would look at, when a site is being mass graded, we typically don't stand around and watch them grade all day. So the grading of the pond, we wouldn't necessarily need to be there for the pond. We do get an as-built to verify the grading, so that's how we check that. We typically would recommend someone to be there at the placing of the liner to ensure that it's placed correctly according to the technical standards of DNR. Verify verify some structure placement. That's, the structure inverts are also in an as-built, so we wouldn't need to be there the entire time for that. We would spot check, topsoil placement, 4 inches of topsoil. That could be an in and out kind of inspection. And then some of the work that will take place later this spring, such as like the asphalt, if any asphalt needs to be relayed, that is something we would typically be asked by our municipal clients to be there for. That hasn't been established, what's gonna be done with the asphalt. What we agreed at our last meeting is that, Eric and Kapoor would go out and mark the areas that are unacceptable, and then those areas would have to be repaired or reconstructed, depending on what needed to be done. On the asphalt, the shouldering would need to be completed. We agreed that Kapoor and Public Works would also mark those areas out in areas that needed to be done. The roads need to be certified, and as part of our discussion, no one had been present representing the village at the time of paving. So we're going to request borings be done in the roadway to verify the base and then the asphalt layers in order to certify the roadway. So those are kind of the things left out there. Kind of looking, we're getting a lot of pushback on pretty much everything on this project, so looking for your, what would you like us, what kind of role would you like us to play moving forward with the construction? And there's some ditch grading that needs to be done.
Excuse me.
Have they been given that list formally of all those items that you're
Yes,
mentioning?
in meeting minutes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Have they given any specific feedback? I know that you said you're receiving kick, that they're giving you general feedback that it's like, that this is a lot and everything, but have they given any specifics that would be anything of justification of why they would be less than what would be the standards that you've described?
As far as what was gonna be done?
Yes.
The only thing.
Or to the standards that they would have to be done to.
No. Our discussion tomorrow will be clarifying some of the things that I don't think are very clear on the plan set that need to be done, and typically, sometimes they're not on the plan set, like the amount of backfill on a pipe, per se. But we wanna make sure that that's, a lot of times in the plans, you'll say, following, installation to conform with Wisconsin DNR Technical Standard 1001. Don't see that on the plans. So tomorrow, we're verifying, we are doing this. This is what we're looking for. So, I don't know what kind of feedback I'm gonna get on that. If they're not maybe they're thinking they're gonna put in a liner, cause that's what the standard calls for. Maybe they're thinking they're gonna get by without it. I don't know. So no, not any specific pushback.
Okay.
They pretty much,
Just general pushback, just
yeah,
in
just general complaint, but they do it.
Who's all scheduled or confirmed for that tomorrow?
Paul Van Hinkle, no, Ryan Cardinal. I don't know if Mr. Khan is coming.
He did say he was.
Oh, he is? Okay, I'm gonna be there. We're gonna have quite a crew from Kapoor, but we're gonna tell them straight out, we're not no one person's gonna bill their time. We're not billing everybody to this, but we wanna be a united, I've got the most involvement, but my guys who are gonna be out there need to be at the pre-con, obviously. So we're only one of us that's gonna charge time to that. And it's gonna be, Mike Timmers is the head of construction management, he's been out here, worked with Eric before. And one of his guys, Tamer, who's newer with Kapoor, will be the guy who is gonna check in or whatever services you all want. He will be doing that, so he will also be at the pre-construction meeting.
was more concerned on the other side on who's gonna be present.
Oh.
But it's good to know. It's good to know.
We've got a big.
It's good to know. I didn't clarify, but yeah, that's where I was hinting at, is that side, but.
Okay, yeah, I think Mr. Khan and Ryan Cardinal.
Does he have any construction firm come too, BRT?
You know, that is a good question, and I almost called him to confirm that he was. I did not see him on the initial emails, and I was waiting for an invite. I was waiting for an email invite to see if he was attached to that. But that's the key of having a pre-construction, is to have your contractor there.
I'll try and give Mike a call tomorrow
Yeah.
and request that presence be here.
What time's that meeting at tomorrow?
3:30.
3:30.
Eric's gonna be here too, right?
Eric will, yes, thank you. Eric did say he was gonna come.
I didn't respond because I'm not sure I need to be there. I'm not sure, you know.
I'm okay, yeah, you probably don't need to be there.
Yeah.
It's very technical,
I'm
you know.
staying in my lane here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take the afternoon. It's
Sounds
3:30 on a
good.
Friday. No one wants to.
If we were over here with an army, so
Yeah.
they're good.
Yeah.
So,
Got it covered.
so you're looking for feedback from us on if you're taking the appropriate direction and level of control on this?
Yes, you know, some of our communities want more oversight than others. And so just kind of getting a taste of how do you want us to oversee this project?
In my personal opinion, as being a member of the commission, I appreciate the level of concern and detail that you're paying to this particular site. I believe that a lot of the issues that have developed, or more so has not been developed, could have been avoided in the past if we had the same level of detail whenever it was first put together and implemented and engineered and so forth. So my encouragement to you is to keep up the same level of detail, the same level of engineering standards, and to push it through so that we can have a successful project at the end that we're not going to have to remediate or to have to address in the near future.
Good.
So I say you're on the right path and continue to do it.
And I agree with Tony. I think Mike Kahn, he's at his feet held to the fire. And unless we do that, he will cut every corner he possibly can, because that's what he does. He's done it for years, and it's not going to change. And I do appreciate all the work you're putting into this. I think it's important that it falls through that way.
So,
So Mary says, stay in your lane.
so
But it's not
shall,
a no passing zone, so.
yeah. So shall we go based on Mike Timmer's recommendation of when we should be out there, and then be in attendance? Like if,
You mean as far as the construction management
Yeah,
aspect
yeah.
goes? Yeah, I'm not a construction management guy. I mean, I would trust Mike's input on that, and based on what he sees tomorrow at the meeting,
yeah,
and the level of competence on the other side of the fence, you know.
right.
If he feels comfortable that they're gonna get the job done and follow direction, great.
Yeah, and they're providing the as-built and all that to verify, and you don't have to sit out there every minute and babysit them, great, that's, as long as you're comfortable to do
Okay.
that.
That's, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that input. That's what I just wanted to get a feel for, if that was, yeah.
The whole reason we pay Kapoor.
So
Keep us out of trouble.
I do have a curious question about the wetland itself.
Yes.
So we have to take a portion of the wetland, correct, for the final pond and?
No, we're not getting into the wetland at all.
Not at all?
No,
Okay.
and they're detaining everything in the pond. So
Okay.
at one time, we did talk about allowing them to detain the 100-year in the wetland. It's contained in the pond.
Really? They were able to get that?
They
figured?
were able to get that, yeah. So, we don't have a lot of freeboard, there's not a lot of extra room, but they were able to get it in the pond.
Okay, fair enough.
Mhm.
Good.
Is there an action needed on that, or no?
I think you have to approve the,
Yeah, approve the amendment to the stormwater management plan.
Don't we need to sign? updated changes in the basin.
Yeah, so if you could,
So it'll be a conditional approval, assuming that they do those changes to the stormwater management plan.
yeah, so a couple the conditions I wrote in my review,
Yeah.
and then, which included changes to the maintenance plan, updating changes and recording the maintenance plan, and the as-built for the pond. And then what I brought up for tonight, in addition to that, would be the following the technical standard of Wisconsin DNR 1001. Yeah, for the construction of the pond.
So we'd be looking at a conditional approval tonight, assuming that those recommendations from Kakura are honored, followed through, correct?
I believe I understand that correct, yeah.
Was that a motion?
We'd say that was a motion, my motion, yeah.
Okay.
We need a second to that motion?
We do.
I second that.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving along. Item 5, planners report for January, February.
Update with respect to the certified survey map, for that condo project. The original certified survey map that combined the 3 lots, still not signed, still not recorded, because we still haven't gotten the proper, resolution to that easement that goes out to Highway 164.
Would that also now include the easement that goes out to Edgewood?
And now it will include, yeah,
Okay.
that easement as well.
Wasn't that kind of put on hold because of the chance of the road changing gears?
Actually, what will probably happen is the original CSM with the easement that goes out to 164 will finalize on its own, and a separate easement document for the benefit of that new lot will be created that
For the new CSN, that's the combined,
allows
which
for,
would make sense, yeah.
yes, so it will be an
Two,
easement recorded that just depicts the road alignment and the area set aside for it, and it will be for the benefit of that lot.
makes sense.
So the improvement that would be put on top of the easement going through the landfill would become the property of the Condo Owners Association, General Condo Owners Association,
Correct,
but they wouldn't physically own the land that improvement sits upon.
right, but we'll require that there be a recorded easement document that gives them perpetual right to utilize it for that road purpose.
I believe that we should probably start clarification on what would have to happen if that road would have to be removed in part or in whole in the future in order to remediate that landfill contamination. And the reason
I
being
also
is
wonder what
there,
it does to the chain of ownership.
well, that's exactly it, and it may affect how the easement would have to be portrayed.
Worded, yeah.
Because it's not, it will be the only accessible easement into that property, because the easement before is not to be developed because it's not conforming. It's not wide enough to make the proper entranceway. And that would give the situation where that condo property would be without access.
In the event of something.
For a potential extended period of time, if that entire site has to be remediated. And I think now would be the time for clarification on that,
Okay.
since the CSM is not complete to start with. Does that make sense? It's a lot.
It's good, it's good.
Anything else on that one? With respect to the Ripplebrook East subdivision plat, Naomi might have an update, but I know that they had inquired about getting their final plat ready, which means they want to get their construction plans, stormwater management plans in for review and approval to be captured into a development agreement. I know I saw a draft development agreement from Naomi with some notes about how she'd like to change that document to capture all the essentials. So I think that's where we're at right now, is in the staff review process.
Yeah, I heard from, I talked to Mr. Stiza and I talked to two of his, well, he hired Payne and Nolan to do, finish up the site design and the resubmittals for the final plat. And I talked to the design, gave him a list of things that we needed resubmitted. Talked to the design engineer with some clarifications, but have not seen anything submitted yet. But they're aware of the things that we need, such as there was a stormwater agreement that we didn't have, that I didn't have in the file, so they're working on that. Stormwater maintenance plan. So
it's all churning along, and the next step will be that the planning commission will see a development agreement and a stormwater management agreement, and those related plans come to you for review, consideration, and possible recommendation to the board. With respect to Sweet Ball, we just got word today that they did follow up and combine 2 out of the 3 lots. They combined the 2 that have the buildings on them, and the 3rd that's vacant, they opted to leave vacant.
Which makes sense, and you have building crossing lot lines,
Yep.
that makes it the easy decision right there, but.
Right, so that's done. They haven't really begun to move in over there. There's a few trucks parked on the south side of the building, all set back further than the front wall of the building, like we had stipulated. Otherwise, it's pretty quiet over there yet.
Do they have to submit a CSM for combining those 2 parcels?
They don't. When you're combining, you can quit claim away a lot line.
Okay. Because it's under common ownership?
Right.
Okay, got it.
Yep. With respect to chapter 13, the construction site erosion control chapter rewritten was adopted by the village board at their meeting. So that's done. The update is complete.
Almost.
What are we waiting on?
We got an email from the DNR, and they
Oh,
have
no.
a few extra things they want included. Not in rewriting chapter 13, but.
Yeah. Did you say statute of limitations?
Well, it's their document.
It's more community outreach and education and things like that that the village has to stand in on.
Diversity control.
So we'll just in the process of documenting all of that in our final submittal. Chapter 13's done.
Yeah, just the supplemental
This
stuff
is
that they're asking
the
for.
stuff that has to go to the DNR just needs a little extra polishing, if you will.
Do you have any update on Hastings? I know back in January you said that they were looking for putting together a schedule.
Yeah, I've not heard an update. I've not had any contact since then.
I have a meeting with Dan next Thursday afternoon. I'll have an update then, I hope. Hopefully a good one.
Yeah, they invested a lot of money in those plans that they put together. I'd be surprised if they would let them sit too.
That's it for planners?
That's it.
Fire inspector's report.
Continuing on the inspections yet, we're still moving forward on that. We had a hard month this month, it was cold, a lot of fires in the surrounding areas, so we were kind of busy, so we're still doing everything's going good, everything looks good out there.
Good. You doing okay?
Any questions? Am I doing okay?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I'm
saw
doing
you at the
okay,
city
you know where I
barbecue.
was, you know
Right.
what, you know the story about
Yep.
me, so just leave it at that.
Making sure you're staying healthy.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I told him to.
Big Bendis, you guys responded to both house fires here recently, correct?
Yes.
All 13 loads of water, the one.
Yeah, the one in Waukesha was 13 loads, it's 46,000 gallons of water,
Two
one
loads.
truck.
2 loads in Vernon.
That was the one on Oakdale?
Wow.
Yeah, that thing was crazy. The amount of,
Yeah, it was a
the amount
chimney
of
fire.
the responding parties and the amount of water you guys were pulling into that place was crazy.
Well, you gotta remember, the temperature was 10 below.
Water.
A million what?
We're a million gallons of
Yeah.
water.
But you gotta remember, it was 10 below,
Yeah.
and what do? You keep water rolling.
You gotta keep it moving, yeah, otherwise.
Yeah,
it's
otherwise
crazy.
it'll freeze right up and you're
Yeah,
gonna be.
no, I saw the pictures of the little pods you guys had, built or you kept filling and whatever they were pumping out of.
Yeah.
That was wild.
Yeah, each of those hold 3,000 gallons of water.
Yeah.
We got 3,500 gallons of water.
3,500? I'm sorry.
Times 13.
Oh, well, that's okay, you're talking about the truck, yeah.
Yeah.
right.
That's wild.
I gotcha.
How much does that hold?
3,500 gallons.
3,500 gallons of water, the
Yeah.
tender does.
And then we hauled another 7,000 gallons to Vernon.
The Vernon was the Valley View one?
Yeah.
And we do use a hydrant up here, and because of the one that Vernon, we use the hydrant here in Crowbar, but next crossing on Moose Lodge. And I clean that out and keep that nice and clean so we can get the trucks in there and off the road because the people come over the top of that hill. They're in a hurry to get home.
Yeah, don't make any ice and water
Yeah.
and slippery spots.
Yep, Vernon didn't even make it back home with their tanker.
But we did,
We did.
even though I wasn't there.
That one was out pretty quick too, wasn't it?
Yeah, a couple
Consider-
hours we were
yeah.
out there.
Very good. Building inspector's report. No building inspector tonight.
Said everything is going along.
Good. Engineer's report. Naomi, anything else?
Nothing I can think of.
Outstanding. Any correspondence?
Motion to adjourn.
Just like now.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
I think this is the earliest one we have, you got Tony. I said, I think this is the earliest one we have, you got Tony.
You might be right. Last time it was like 10:40.
Yeah, yeah.
Really? And yeah, kind of nice to have some short ones after 2 years of really long ones around that recodification.
Right.
Yes, sir.